Thank you very much again for joining us after the short break. So we're going to have another panel that is going to be moderated by our very own editor-in-chief, who is Elvis Mogesa, who came in earlier for the opening remarks as well. So Elvis Mogesa, you can take it over from here. And in the meantime, perhaps our panelists, you can just have your cameras on. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks so much, Pereso. I want to first welcome all of us once again. Again, we have people physically in Kabarak, in Nakuru, which is in Kenya, and then we also have a really beautiful panel. Calvin joining us from Uganda, Lisa, who will be joining in later from Pretoria, and then also Ayotunde from Nigeria. So I'm really excited for this wonderful conversation. So first of all, I just want to lay the emphasis on the rationale of this panel, right? And then I will kick things off as so that we don't waste any more time. We want to hear from each other, right? So this panel is a panel of current editors-in-chiefs, and I guess for Lisa and Calvin, this is editors-in-chiefs who have just exited the position, right? So the objective of the panel is this should be a roundtable discussion, and emphasis is on discussion on the day-to-day functionings of a student, these student-led law reviews, and we hope to share strategies and the functionings of our law review. And I've already been speaking to Wendy, right? So we can really learn a lot from each other. And then we also hope that these discussions build upon the two main discussions in the morning session. So which are the intellectual space that student-led law reviews occupy, and these sort of practical inhibitors to their growth. And here we can think about funding, we can think about editorial capacity, and the high turnover rate. So I would just want to thank so much for all of our panelists. So we have 5 panelists. Yes, as the program mentions, the first one is Calvin Obita, who is he's the editor-in-chief of Makerere Law Journal for the year that has just passed, 2025. And then we have Wendy Koske, who's with us here in Kabarak. She's the new editor-in-chief of the University of Nairobi Law Journal. And as we followed from the first panel, this is the first journal to be established in Kenya. It's very old and it has rich substance. Like our own dean was the editor-in-chief when he was student at University of Nairobi. The next panelist is Gesimba Atinga. Gesimba is also the last editor-in-chief of the Moi Law Journal. We have a really strong relationship with them. Gesimba has been to our school for a couple of times. We've benchmarked, and we are really glad to have seen that they were able to publish the new volume earlier this year. Then the next panelist is Ayotunde Abaidun, who's the editor-in-chief of the University of Lagos Law Review. And the final panelist is Lisa Ndiulo, who is also the previous editor-in-chief of Pretoria Student Law Review, which for me is always a huge standard because they're always consistent and they're now clocking almost 20 volumes. So thank you so much. So we'll jump right into it. So my first question will be to Gesimba, right? So Gesimba, I want you to describe the day-to-day functioning of your journal. So how many days of a week or how many hours in a week do you guys work on the journal, or what is the work basically that you do? Yeah, it's just simple. Thanks.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Mugesa. I hope you can audibly get me. I don't know.
Yes, we can.
Right. Thank you so much. So allow me to begin by appreciating this chance and this invite to be part of your conference week. It is something that's very inspirational, and I'd like to commend you for the good work that you're doing. Now, I'd like to begin from the point that it is normally said, until the lion learns how to write, every story is going to glorify the hunter. So this is very important because we are coming together to tell our story. We are not letting other people say it on our behalf. So regarding the day-to-day running of Moi University Law Journal, I don't have a lot to say. Granted, you have said that I am a pioneer editor-in-chief, so there is really not much to speak on. And I would only focus on the incoming team because we have a very brilliant team of trainees that are willing to take up the mantle, and they have actually since worked on a newsletter which has been released. So that is what I will speak on. Now, the Moi University Law Journal convenes at least twice a week on Tuesday and Friday for at most 2 hours, that is 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. So during those meetings, we have briefings on whatever has been updated since the past, whoever has submitted any pieces for perusal and approval, and what do they look like, because we open up our doors to more than scholarly submissions. So we have something that's called a sidebar. Yeah, no pun intended. This sidebar is where we have people who celebrate their own achievements, send in pictures of the daily development of law students and the legal fraternity. So the daily operation of Moi University Law Journal just revolves around the members. We have a 7-member team, and this 7-member team meets and deliberates on the submissions that are there. Sorry, just a second. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. I guess if I realize what needs to be changed, like your video is a bit, but it's okay. I'll bring you back in guessing, but let's move on to Calvin, who was an editor-in-chief in Makerere Law Journal. You can answer still the same question, and then we'll bring in Gesimba. So, what is the day-to-day functionings of your law journal? You're also an old journal, right? Over 50 volumes, if I'm not wrong, right? So you must have like rich. Just okay. I've seen Gesimba is back just before. Gesimba, are you able to speak?
Not quite. Still some
Okay,
technical
so
hitches.
okay, so let me invite Calvin, and then we'll get back to you.
Elvis, just to confirm, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. So, hello everyone on the panel. I would like to firstly thank the Kabarak University Press for having organized such a good discussion. I've been following the conference from yesterday to today, and a lot of good discussions have been taking place. So I'm quite grateful. And I also thank Elvis, who we have had a bit of chats on email here or there. So thank you. To get into it, in terms of how the Makerere Journal works, is it was established in 1972. What happens for us is that so each tenure basically takes on what the other tenure started. So what we do is when we get new editors, we have to first train them. Because remember, these are people in senior two, sorry, not senior two, in year 2, year 3, even year 4 of law school, but they are not yet interfaced with such technical aspects. So we have a training where we take them through the first part, which is in terms of critiquing a paper, providing inbuilt comments, being able to teach them about referencing styles. And then the second part now becomes teaching them also to be able to think outside of the box, like what else are what the myths that can help them. So we don't have technically a calendar in regards to how we enforce this. But what happens is that at the beginning of your tenure, you set out to understand how many papers you want to publish, because you understand at the end of your tenure, you have to produce a volume as a method of accountability to the university and also your fellow students. So what happens is that, like for us in our time, we produce 17 papers. So your tenure starts from about September and goes to about May, ideally. But of course, when we get to the challenges aspect, we shall also understand that because of different factors that come in, there, which can be made better, I would say, you find the tenure can even extend to when you leave law school. Like on my end, you find I was still there. I'm doing some work until about September. Later, I had finished in May. So that's what I would say about just how it runs day to day. Maybe the last aspect is that you find that we have papers that we keep on having an editorial process with the authors. We edit, they send back the papers. So basically what happens is the first point of exchange is when we receive the papers, we verify if it does meet the standards to be published under the Makerere Law Journal. And from there, we hand it over to the editors who work on the papers, and then they send it back to us, who send it back to the author through the email of the journal. And from there now, when they send in the comments, when they work on the comments of the authors, that gives us a chance now, the editor-in-chief and the deputy, to get in deep to see what the editors did and provide any other comments to ensure that the paper meets the standard required of the journal. That's what I would say for now.
Just a follow-up question. So the people who you send to, are they reviewers or peer reviewers, or are they editors within your board? Just a clarification on that.
So they're basically editors within the board itself. So we have two editors. We have two types of editors. That's the editors who are in year 2, year 3, and year 4. And then we have associate editors who are the year 1s. So because, of course, they're just in year 1, they have interface with much legal materials. So they are sort of put under the wing of an editor who helps to teach them what they should do. But then also, so that when they become editors the next year, they're able to become more efficient. So it's just the editors. We unfortunately don't have reviewers per se as of now. So the final review, I would say, would be myself if I'm editor-in-chief, or the deputy editor-in-chief. But we ensure that the standard is met as it has been for the last 55 years or 54.
Yeah, great. And I should mention, like, I think I don't expect you to have standing peer reviewers. It depends with the paper and it depends with who accepts, because it can be sometimes hard. And this is something perhaps you can discuss more. When expert here, because we're student editors, like Strathmore Law Review use the term expert reviewer because it sort of mentions that this is someone who's an expert in that field who is going to do the double blind, right? Where they don't know who the author is, the author doesn't know who they are, and it's 2 rounds, so it means it can be more than one. So thank you so much, Calvin. And you've mentioned, I think, a lot that is consistent throughout, training, where you even can train people who are in their 4th year. I think this is also something we are doing in the law review, where someone can bud late, like BUD, they can bloom later on in the law school year, and we're able to still invite them in the law review when they're in the 3rd year, in the 4th year. And we've had really good people at that age. So I want to bring you back to Simba, so that you can finish, and then we'll move on to another panel.
Right. Thank you so much. Apologies for the technical hitch, technology. So we have a number of members in our team, and the daily running of the journal really involves people who are about to take up those roles, finding out what they are about and getting to bolster their responsibilities. So we have the editor-in-chief, the incoming editor-in-chief, who actually happens to be here in Kabarak today, finding out the intricacies of the coordination of the team, having to build a team, and not really just professionally. Something I learned from Kabarak Law Review, and I'm very grateful for it, is that you need not only work as a professional colleague, but you also need to be friends so that you understand each other on various levels and it gets easier to cooperate. We have the managing editor who takes care of the receipts of all submissions. We have the blog editor who actually takes care of some of our social media and engagement. And we have our peer review editor who is in charge of, qualifying the papers and making sure that our submissions are ready, including the active newsletter. So this would, in part, represent a brief image of our daily runnings of the journal. And we are also looking to learn, we're also willing to borrow some leaves from our fellow editors that are on board here so that we can also spice up whatever we do during our meetings. That would be all for now. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kisimba. So before we move on, I want to recognize one of our advisory board members, new advisory board members of the Kabarak Law Review, and she's going to be a panelist in the 4th panel, which you definitely shouldn't miss, Ms. Ilana Luhu. So she's, and her work really influences. She has a guardian's reflection, and I alluded to the peer review problem. I think what she discusses that Pretoria Student Law Review faced. And I also see Lisa, who has just joined us, who's the representative from Pretoria. Perhaps we'll speak more about this. You know, like sometimes we ask someone to peer review, and they ask us are you going to compensate us? You know, and it's always, you know, we are students first of all, and then so we barely even have money to make sure the journal is in print. And it's speaking to a larger neoliberal logic that was spoken in the first panel by the editors who did that genealogy research. So for the same question, I'll invite Wendy, and then Ayotunde, and then lastly, Lisa.
Right. Thank you. Good morning. It's still morning. Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to be a part of this panel. Thank you so much, Elvis, for your consideration and for even part of the facilitation to come here. We do not take it for granted. I can resonate with the sentiments by Mr. Gesimba and Mr. Calvin on how the journal is ranked. So not to, or rather to buttress what they say, we have just said, we usually have meetings every Tuesday with the whole editorial team from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. strictly, or if we have a lengthier agenda, usually from 7:30 to 9 p.m. Then we deliberate on the activities that we need to complete for that particular week, so that on Sunday we have in our WhatsApp group to give a departmental report on each and every activity that we were supposed to do, to accomplish by the end of that week, or the progress we have made, or if there are any challenges we are facing with regard to that particular activity, we address it there and then, and that's how it flows. So of activities is in line with our annual academic year calendar for the law journal. So whatever activities we have planned for that particular year, of course, we break it down to months and to weeks so that each particular week has a target, each particular month has a target, so that we achieve what we are supposed to do by the end of that particular academic year, or by the end of our tenure in office. So any other thing that has been mentioned with, I think that was alluding to probably the fourth question we've had. Let me not. We've preempted a lot with regard to the training. So when onboarding new editors, our training is both generally as a journal and departmental. So for example, if we have a marketing editor, so let me preface this by saying there is a standard that each and every editor is required to meet. So in line with the Constitution, each and every editor is required to be familiar with or scholar referencing style, because that is our standard university referencing style. We are required to know, basic grammar, to know how to structure sentences, structure paragraphs, the methodologies, and so on and so forth. So these are the particular training that we do for generally all the editors that have been onboarded for that particular tenure. But departmental training comes in, for example, if there is the marketing editor, and we have to make posters, we have to make promotional videos, that will be departmental in line with the marketing editor. Of course, every other editor can join in that particular meeting or that training, but that's mostly departmental because that's social media marketing and the like. So it's both departmental and generally as a journal. Anything else? Yes, I think all other things have been alluded to, and we'll get to that later. Yeah, let me stop at that for now.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Wendy. And so I'll just I wonder. Okay, maybe you can answer this when you come in next. But like, yes, you said there's a standard that the editors sort of have to meet, and maybe here it is a student has to meet before they become a student editor. I wonder how you gauged it. So I know for us, we normally have a call for editorial trainees, and we ask them to write, right? So it could be 800 to 2,000 words on. Normally, we link what they write about to our call for papers so that we have the same theme around, and then from that is what we gauge. So the logic here is if someone is able to write well, then they would eventually also be able to edit well, and also just like the length of the research, the breadth that they do. Yeah, and I know Strathmore Review, who is also not represented here, but they really would have loved to use the same standard to onboarding students. And then I also like that you mentioned there's a two-part training, like being trained to be an editor and then just being trained under the departments within your editorial board. That is also similar to us, where the peer reviewer would also just train everyone of their craft, both how diplomatic they should be, and like noticing who's someone who would be able to like review this wonderful paper, and also just understanding that you might have to go and ask like Boas Malin Husipala, who they would think would be a good reviewer. So thank you so much, Wendy. I'll move on to Ayotunda and then Lisa.
All right, thank you so much, Elvis. Can you guys hear me? Am I loud and clear?
Yes, you are.
All right, good morning, everyone from Lagos, Nigeria. First off, I'll say big thank you and kudos to Elvis and his team for pulling this off. It's the first of its kind. And also big shout out to Jimmy, who was really helpful in keeping the communication. And fellow greetings to fellow editor-in-chiefs. Thank you so much for your contributions. But I must say, University of Lagos Law Review is relatively young. We were established in 2017, so about 8 years of age. And within that period, we tried to push out at least a volume of journal every year. So we're about to do the 8th one, I guess, this year, before the end of the year. And in terms of how our operations run, so the way law is wired in Nigeria, we study 5 years for the LLB program. So what we do is we don't take in editors until they're in their second year. So we take in between second to fourth year. And within the law review, we have 3 tiers. We have the associate editors, we have the senior associate editors, and we have the executive editors. And then we have the editorial board, where you have the editor-in-chief, deputy editor-in-chief, the online editor, the online managing editor. So we have those tiers. So when you come in, you necessarily do not have to come in the second year. I mean, you always have your choice. So whenever you decide to come in, you're coming in as an associate editor. And then after you spend 1 year with us, you get promoted to a senior associate editor. So we do it that way because it's a form of mentorship for you to like guide. So when we admit you, and what we use as a test for admission is for you to write a paper on any area of law or policy of your choice, between 800 to 1,200 words. What we want to do is to be able to assess your research and writing skills. And when we've assessed it and see that it meets the standard of what we do at Law Review, you get admitted. And when you get admitted, we run you through trainings too before you officially join the team. And it's interesting to point out that here at the University of Lagos, Nigeria, we have our own legal citation model. So we have something unique. It's as a 4-page document. I could be willing to share that with the team. With every member of the team later on. So we have our own legal citation model, which has been uniquely drafted by members of the faculty from our teaching staff. So we run you through trainings on utilizing that, because that's really your tool when it comes to editing pieces. In terms of operations, so when we get in pieces, the review process starts from the associate editors. So they do the first set of review within a specific timeline, and then they move it forward to the senior associate editors, and then finally to the executive editors before it now gets to the editorial board. So we have a form of quality control. So before a piece is rolled out back to the editor, to the writers or authors, we already have like 4 levels of editors who have gone through those pieces to just do some form of very deep quality review. And then when we send back and then the author reflects the changes and the improvement, then it's just at the editorial board before we do a final publication. So that's really how the operation works. Yeah, we have the online managing editor responsible for our social media, but not to reiterate what has gone along the room. That's pretty much how we operate here. To be glad to improve the conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great. I really want to first congratulate you for two things. I think your consistency for 8 years since your establishment in 2017 is very it's inspiring, like
Thank you so much.
yeah, we are clocking our 5th year next year, and we also really just want to maintain that consistent, and that's really the whole point of this conference, right? Because there've always been a fluctuation about publishing. So that's the first thing. And second thing I want to congratulate you is also having an internal citation guide. I think, especially like for most law schools in Kenya, aside from Strathmore and us, Strathmore has what they call the SLASLEC. We have what we call Kabarak Legal Citation Guide. And it's sort of a rejection, a rejection of using OSCOLA, this UK imposed legal citation guide. And yeah, I think there's so much value in that. And maybe Lisa also will speak about their own citation guide. So that's the second thing I want to congratulate you for. And also, Lisa, could you please, the same question, how is your law review, the day-to-day activities, and and just jumping in from what we've already discussed. Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I hope that you're all doing well. Thank you so much for having me here. And good morning also to those who are spectators. I see that there's a number of attendees. So the day-to-day running of the Pretoria Student Law Review, I think is a little bit different from, and similar in some ways from what our colleagues have now just discussed. So when I was editor-in-chief, and also I believe that my predecessors as well did this, we chose to work on it every day because we were all still students, and that is a rule for being editor-in-chief in the PSLR, or for the PSLR rather, is that you must still be a student of the university. And so, you balance your own studies with your duties as the editor-in-chief or the editor at the PSLR. And so pretty much what that entailed, at least from the perspective of, well, let me start with being an editor. So that means obviously making sure that, you go over the articles allocated to you, do the editorial work, and, communicating with the author whose article you are dealing with, communicating with the peer reviewers. Am I still audible?
Yes, you are.
Oh, okay, sorry. And then from the editor-in-chief perspective, when I say that I pretty much was doing work every day, it was to check in with the editors practically every day to see that, are they fine? Do they need assistance with anything? We prefer an approach that is very, we're holding each other's hands through this. We are a team. So nobody's just doing, you're not just let alone to do what you think is right. We prefer to support each other actively. And so during my tenure, I really emphasize that I'm constantly available to say, listen, if you have an issue with, the peer reviewer editorial process, how do we, deal with 1, 2, 3 issues? As well, the other duties that or responsibilities that are attached to the editor-in-chief role is, of course, deciding whether articles should be published or not, or if they're publishable. And that means working really closely with the senior editors, who are editors who've been on the board for more than a year or two, and who have a strong, I'd say, who shows strong qualities of being an editor. Oh, sorry, Elvis, my bandwidth is low. Okay.
Yeah, but we can still hear you. Just continue. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Who show really strong qualities in editorial work, and usually they are so helpful to carrying the journal and to continuing the journal's work. And that really means that sometimes we sit together and we go through the articles, because we accept articles on a rolling basis as well. This helps. This is also part of the reason why we are working every day. So we sit together and we look at the quality of the articles that are submitted, and also consider whether an article fits into the scope of our special edition, if we do have one, for that issue, and if it fits broadly into the scope of the journal's work. And we also have meetings weekly with the team. At the beginning of the year, though, I will say, or when we have onboarded new editors, sometimes this happens annually, we will have, excuse me, we will have training sessions for the editors. And we use our parent publishing company, or organization, which is Pulp, that is based at the University of Pretoria, to provide editorial support for us as well. And they support our training sessions. And we give out training manuals. We also give the editors activities that they can do, so that we can show them how to actually do the editorial work that is required when we are dealing with author submissions. And again, just to connect that to our weekly meetings, is that it forms part of our aim to work as a team consistently. So even during meetings, instead of just regular check-ins, what we're doing is just also asking the editors to share an article that they're working on that they feel is particularly interesting. And in that way, it also encourages the editors to really engage with the work that they're dealing with, or the papers that they're editing. And I found that really does help, because again, they are still students, the editors. It does help them expand their own interests and their own reading, beyond just what they read as prescribed materials for their LLB program. I don't know if there's anything else I've sort of missed. I think I've briefly touched on everything. This bandwidth issue is kind of bothering me, so I'm going to try and move positions now. So I'm going to just jump off and give it over to you, Elvis.
Okay, great. Yeah, but I just want to say, really, this is so important, and perhaps it speaks to like the longevity, because compared to meeting 2 days, or like working 2 days, you've mentioned how like it's working every day, and perhaps I don't know if you mentioned the amount of hours. I don't think you mentioned the amount of hours, but it might be it's 4 to 6 hours a day, right? And I think this is really the point here. Like the more effort each individual editor, a student editor, puts in on the whole process, the better the final publication looks like. So, and you also mentioned that you're already on rolling basis. This is also something that we've been working towards as the Kabarak Law Review, and we're finally here, where we're receiving manuscripts all through the year. And what really helps is the online journal system where people can just send it through, like from our website, they send it there anytime, and then we start working on it anytime there in the year. Yeah, so I think those are really wonderful remarks from Lisa, and a lot to learn for the rest of us as we are all learning from each other. So recognizing the time, I want us to tackle the next questions like together. So I alluded to this earlier, but I want the next discussion to be around the peer review process. So what is our peer review processes? Is it single or double blind? Is it 2-round single or 2-round double blind, meaning that it is more than one reviewer for a single paper where they're all blind, right? And then what are the challenges here? That's the first question. And the second question is, how do you deal with plagiarism? And do you have like software to access plagiarism tools? And more importantly, like we're the ones who really know how the AI is being used to write papers. Like deep research of ChatGPT can literally just do a whole paper, then it might be accurate, right? So how do we sort of support like this inauthenticity in the papers that are submitted to us? So these two challenges are the next sort of questions. So let's change up a bit. We'll start with Calvin, and then Wendy, and then Ayotunde, and then move on. So Calvin, please. You're muted, Calvin. Yeah. Sorry, we still can't hear you. Okay.
Okay.
Your bandwidth is
Elvis, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But your bandwidth is still
low. Maybe
low.
it was just network.
Okay.
Oh, still low.
Yeah. Let me invite Ayotunde, and then you'll follow Ayotunde.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So your question was on the peer review process and then the challenges and how we're dealing with challenges like plagiarism, right? All right. So for the peer review process, like I said before, we have a 3-tier editor structure. So there's an associate editor, senior associate, and then executive editors who are the more experienced. So when we get a piece from, so I deal with correspondent as editor-in-chief. So when an author sends us a piece, I acknowledge, and then I do a blind review of the paper. So I basically take out details. So you can see who the author is, you can see any affiliation. So I make the paper as bland as possible. And then internally, I think we're quite a decent medium-sized team of about 20 to 25 editors. So we're able to split ourselves into groups to deal with a lot of workload. Like in academic sessions where we have a lot of papers, we have at least 3 teams internally that can deal with that, and they still maintain that structure of the associate, senior associate, and the executive editors. So once those copies, the manuscript are blinded, then the associate editors begin to work on them. So when they are done, they move it forward to the senior associate editors. And then when they are done, they move it forward to the executive editors who are the most experienced. And when the executive editors are done, they send it back to the editorial board, where we have so the editorial board will about 4, 5, depending on the academic session, and then we do the final set of review and then send back. So what we also try to do is to instill a sense of confidence into what every editor does. So what we do is when they get the manuscript and when they are done reviewing, they need to pass a vote, a yes or no vote, and they give it justification. So yes, this paper should be published because it discusses an emerging issue, or no, it's not because it's not quality enough. So we don't just want them to do the review, we also want them to have a final say in terms of outcomes, whether that piece gets published or not. So that's pretty much how the peer review process works. In terms of dealing with challenges, there are a lot of challenges. First, it's the fact that the primary thing is for students. So we also have to juggle that with our academic obligations. And so sometimes we have to be flexible enough, but also strict on timelines. And we also try to factor in the academic calendar as to when we expect certain periods to be busy. So when we know a certain period is going to be busy in school, we tend not to be unrealistic in terms of timelines and deliverables. So we allowed us sort of flexibility. To do with an issue of plagiarism, I try to do that first when I get the paper. As editor-in-chief, I try to go through it, read through, or check if it has not been published before, because one of our requirements is that your manuscript must not have been published elsewhere. So I try to do like internet searches to see, oh, does this meet the requirement before I now proceed? There have been instances where after a few prompts on the internet, oh, I find out that, oh, this manuscript already exists. So I would rather not disturb or engage the team with that. I just send it back and say, oh, apologies, it doesn't meet standard requirement because it has been published elsewhere. So, and then when you talk about the conversation of AI, I think that's really interesting because there are angles to this, right? So angles as to funding to be able to afford resources like plagiarism checkers. Right here at the University of Lagos, funding has always been a problem. What we normally do most times is the editorial board try to bootstrap, right? So we used to enjoy partnerships with a lot of law firms, but since the pandemic happened, some of the structures are really like falling out. So what we try to do now is to rely on the alumni system to like maintain some form of funding. And also we try to be as cost effective as possible. So for a while now, we've not printed physical copies. We've just really gone open source, where we have a journal for the year or any publication at all. You can just find that on our website. So no extra cost. The extra cost will just come in when, if you really prefer a physical copy. So we have instances where schools or institutions or individuals are really interested in having physical copies, and then they reach out to us, and then we do the whole costing and then try to ship it out them after so they will bear that cost basically, and then we'll factor in any administrative cost from our hand to like satisfy that need. So pretty much, I think those are the challenges right now. As the conversation goes further, I would also touch on more.
Great, thank you so much, Tunde. So yeah, like you've spoken about so much that I really want to piggyback on. I just want one clarification on your review process. You mentioned this three-tier system of the associate, senior editor, and executive editors. Is there any stage at the review process that you send it to an expert of that specific paper? So it's a professor who writes on international law and the law they see, and then the paper is on the Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, recent ICJ, right? And then it's analyzing that discussion, and then now so you send it to that professor or three or four. It doesn't have to be a professor. It can be a master's student, a master's holder who is doing that, right? Do you at any point have that process? And is it just one? Can it be two? That's why I said 2 or 3 round. Yeah, just one clarification on that.
All right, so that's a very interesting point you flag, because we've had instances where we've had renowned academics or renowned legal practitioners send us piece, and when they get back their manuscripts, they tend to look up the editors, and then they find out that all of these editors are students, and then they tend to reply and say, oh, why is there no a peer reviewer? That kind of sort. But the issue is, I think it's a fundamental problem in the fact that they tend to downplay the importance of like student-led law reviews. So it's student-led. We have a faculty member, we have, our lecturers to guide us, and we also have a course advisor who checkmates what we do. But ideally, it's student-run. So the whole concept of this law review is that students come on board and help to promote legal scholarship. So, but there are rare instances where we could have very complex. So it's not our usual practice to always go and find peers. We believe so much in the abilities of the student to promote legal scholarship. So they are the first cause of responders to those manuscripts. It's in rare instances where things are really complicated, maybe things are really complex, that we tend to approach like members of the faculty as to leveraging their expertise on certain issues. But primarily, it's a student-led law review, and students are responsible.
Yeah, great. So, thank you for that clarification. So, here I would have to sort of give a contrary view. While we are student-led, I think the institution of double-blind peer review is so revered in the academic publishing space that if we do not have it, then our legitimacy crumbles. And even when I was an editorial trainee, when I was being taught, we read some of these papers. There's one by someone called Natalie Cotton, where she's responding to a judge who was arguing that why are students running law reviews? And this is obviously in the US, where it is students who sort of like take up all the time in those in those editorial boards, right? And then this student was like, yes, but it is also because of this institution of the double-blind peer review system. So perhaps as the other people will be speaking, we might listen to their like approaches on the review process. But I would vehemently say that it is important that as student-led law reviews, we have this institution of the double-blind peer review system. And the problems that just come is that sometimes someone says no, as I said earlier, sometimes someone might ask for compensation. And it just might be hard to get someone who, because one paper we got this year was dealing with critical philosophy deconstruction. And so we were sending to lawyers and they're all just saying there's too much philosophy for a legal paper, you know. So we needed them to look for someone within that field to be the double-blind reviewer.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree
Yeah.
with you. But again, it's not. So my point was, it's not usual practice. It depends on the complexity of the manuscript, and also to add, we also have instances where, like you alluded to, sometimes you don't find those practitioners who are free enough to do those reviews for you, and then some instances we have lawyers and legal practitioners who write to us and say, "Oh, I'm this. My practice area is this. If the event you have manuscripts that align with this my interest, you can send to me for review." So again, it's always a theme of context, right? The timeline, and then also you internally, you have a deadline to meet in terms of when you want to push out a journal edition. So those are the factors. But primarily, we like to tend to put our students forward because I think that's the whole essence of it. The ability for us to like learn, improve, and then promote legal scholarship.
Yes, and I think you really have like said all the problems that really come with this. So and even for us, the time is such a huge thing because we almost give 4 months of our editorial process to peer reviewers because you know these are very senior people. We have to remind them over and over again. And normally it is also the practice for other journals, but and I hope maybe this conversation we can get tricks from other law reviews, but to just lessen this time. One thing I want to say is like in the challenges you mentioned the alumni system as a way of funding yourself. This is new to us. I know we have some of our alumni in Kabarak presently in this conversation, so they should like sort of expect us to utilize this method of like generally having being self-funded. Thank you so much. So Calvin, please, same questions. It seems that we still can't hear you, Calvin. Because of time, I really want us to like maximize this. So I'll move on to Wendy, and then we'll come back to you, Calvin.
Right, thank you. Peer review process is double blind. let's just preface it. Let me just acknowledge that we have received email and CC the managing department and the research department. So the papers are divided into groups. So editors are divided into groups of associate editors and more senior editors, who are then termed as deputy head reviewers. So there's the head of review, who is usually the research editor. Then there are deputy head reviewers, who are part of, some of them members of the board, some of them senior associate editors. And so the deputy head reviewers have teams of associate editors in those particular teams. We divide the papers per team. So each and every editor gets an opportunity to review. For example, if we've received like 15 papers and we have 5 groups of 3, 5 groups. The math in my head is not mathing, but I think you get what I'm saying with regard to associate editors. Each associate editors goes through a certain number of papers that they've been assigned in their team. They make comments on the strength of the paper, the weakness of the paper, the recommendations they have with regard to the paper, if the paper should be published or not. Then all the comments are recorded in a Google form that is edited in real time. So by all the editors, and then it's sent back to the deputy head reviewer. Deputy head reviewer accounts for each and every paper that the team was given, that all of them have been reviewed within the stipulated time, typically 2 weeks. That the papers have been reviewed, and then it goes back to the law review editor. The law review editor again makes sure that research editor makes sure that all the papers have been reviewed. Then they are sent to expert reviewers. Now, here is where the rubber meets the road. I think you alluded to the fact that you give expert reviewers a period of 4 months to review the papers and send them back to us to essentially give back to the authors. The rubber meets the road in the sense that more often than not, and we've experienced this from 2022. 2022 was unfortunately, our last consistent volume, in the sense that we got a new set of expert head reviewers. We sent to them the papers. We keep reminding them, kindly assist us in reviewing. By the time they are done and they have made such significant comments on the paper, when we send them back to the author is in disarray, for lack of a better word, with regard to, I sent my paper in February. You told us that it has been reviewed by the students within that particular month, March. Then it went to the expert head reviewer. That's our academic break usually, where we are having other trainings. So they are seeing that activities in the journal are progressing, but their papers are not with them, or they have not yet worked on their papers. So by the time we are sending the papers back to them, they're like, I'm done. You get, and I think that's something that we can address here, or you can assist me. That has really affected our consistency. So by the time, some authors are discouraged, some authors move forward. So by the time we are done, a whole academic year is passed, we've published, and people are like, oh, wow, this took so much time, but it is because of that expert review stage. So that is essentially what we do. With regard to plagiarism checkers, I know that was onboarded with our school admin recently. So we are in communication with our dean and our patron to essentially allow the admin to extend us an account with regard to the plagiarism checkers, because again, they are costly. Yes. So I think that's all for that question. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Wendy. And you see, like, for us then not being consistent, it is because of like this time that the expert reviewers took, so it really is, in many ways, it is the heart and also our like our Achilles heel. Like it is our heart, like this is what we really need, but it is also our Achilles heel. Because if it takes time, then we don't issue out in time, right? So thank you so much. And I also will mention that, yes, like and this is something I wanted to mention with Ayotunde, for plagiarism checkers, we also, at least for our law review, we primarily focus on manual checking. And this is obviously later on, if we are sure this is a paper we want to publish, like a footnote by footnote source and fact checking is always sort of that will cure everything, because sometimes the checker might not get to see everything. And sometimes we find there are papers where someone has footnoted the source right, but they misrepresent the words of the original author as their own words. This is something very rampant, I guess, with LLB students, where you're like, I mean, I've cited the author, but you haven't paraphrased, or you haven't really written as like a paraphrasing of what that author had said. So this is really solved by source and fact checking every single thing. So thank you so much, Wendy. Let's move on to Lisa and then Kasimba.
Hi, so regarding our peer review process, we adopt a double blind peer review process. And basically we send all our submissions, the manuscripts to seasoned academics and also legal practitioners. Our approach, at least, is that we start in-house. So we start with academics in our faculty at the University of Pretoria. And if they are unable to, for whatever reason, we then move outward to other institutions surrounding us. Luckily, our faculty has a broad array of legal expertise and experts who are so willing to lend assistance to us. It is, I do know that there might be a staff member on here, but I think I can say this, that it is one of their duties as a staff member to lend assistance to the journal. And regarding so obviously we anonymize like the other journals do as well. We anonymize the articles before we send them out. The editors who are allocated an article go through the article, make sure that it is according to our style guide, ensure that they are, the quality is generally really good before you send it to the reviewer. Because if the reviewer comes across an article and the grammar is bad and, an idea is not fully, fleshed out, they might have more issue with that than the substance. And we really want reviewers to just deal with substance and to give their input on the substance and the argument that the author is trying to make. And so we anonymize it, so reviewers obviously don't know who has written what. And also we give them a review report, which they, use to tell us what it is that needs to be addressed in the article, along with the actual manuscript, where they make track changes or, notes, comments on the sides, as advice to the author. And then they also then give their recommendation whether the article is publishable. They also tell us whether, if it's not publishable, whether it should just be outward rejected or, fixed for resubmission, right? And ultimately, the decision is, excuse me, the decision on whether an author should resubmit or, those nitty-gritties come back to the editor-in-chief. they obviously will go through what the peer reviewers have said. Where there is somewhat of a disagreement, huge discrepancy between one peer reviewer, because there's two, one peer reviewer and another. Again, we exercise our judgment to see, is this really a huge discrepancy, or are there any commonalities between their comments to the author regarding the quality of the paper? And also, really, should we reject it, or should we advise that they rework the submission and submit it to us again at a later stage? And again, I think having submissions or accepting submissions on a rolling basis helps with this, because it doesn't deter authors, because they are students a lot of the time. It doesn't deter them from wanting to submit again. And I found that we have had a lot of success in that regard. So when we do tell somebody that, unfortunately, the reviewers have suggested that or recommended that your paper be rejected, we tell them how to, we give them guidance on how to rework their manuscript, and we let them know that, listen, this is ultimately really great feedback, and something that we really want to prioritize as well, which is, I think, this is why the review process and the editorial process work hand in hand, is that it also trains the editors as well, because they also get to see things that they would have missed, and they get to apply their minds on the advice that the reviewers give. And I think it strengthens our editors' own academic capabilities in that regard. After, we receive the review reports, we then go into the editors specifically, because they're the ones who communicate with the peer reviewers. They, of course, go back and anonymize where the peer reviewer hasn't anonymized themselves in their comments, and they also expand on, the comments that have been left by the peer reviewer for the author, so that it's easier for the author to follow through on the advice that's been given to them, or the comments, and they know what to do. So then we don't have too much of a back and forth. But usually, if a paper hasn't been labeled as resubmit, so to say, we don't go back to peer review process. It's then just a back and forth between the editor and the author. So once, the author receives the paper the first time after it's come back from peer review, they will be making major changes. Yes, so something else I want to touch on that I think is clearly quite a big problem in the academic space and in legal or academic publication is the timeframes. Reviewers do take forever. They are literally the reason that even outside of, student-led journals, reviewers are the problem. Because they are, of course, juggling their actual day-to-day academic jobs, their, legal practitioner jobs. So they sometimes do take forever. We at the PSLR give reviewers 4 to 6 weeks. And we obviously ask the editors to ensure that they check in every now and again, and, just give a bit of a nudge, a gentle reminder, just to say, hey, the deadline is coming up if they haven't submitted it yet. It is only when we are coming to the 2 to 3 month period where the editor-in-chief then steps in and speaks to the reviewer themselves. But usually I find that our editors are so good at this, and, the reviewers actually do respond favorably. Sometimes, yeah, we are very understanding, because again, academics do have, very demanding jobs and high workloads. So it does take quite a toll. I mean, this is something that I did have to emphasize to my own team, and to say, listen, it can be quite frustrating that you are, on the one hand, the author is speaking to you like, hey, where is, is there any feedback? And then you are thinking as an editor, well, the review is the one who's holding up the process, and you have to now go and nudge the reviewer frequently. But I did impress upon them that, listen, this is something that goes beyond, the student-led law reviews. This happens in journals that aren't, just student-based. I mean, even in my own publication experience, I've had to deal with a paper that was only published the year after I had submitted it, because reviewers took 4 or 5 months. So it's really not the journal's fault a lot of the times. And so I do try and, say to the editors, just be understanding of that fact. And if it's really if it really does become a problem where now we are crunched for time, we usually find somebody else. We just kindly let that reviewer know that, listen, you haven't been able to submit a report to us in this period, and we are really grateful for your assistance to this point. We will be moving on with somebody else. And we obviously communicate this to the author as well, and let them know that we've decided to find another reviewer for your paper. And so it may take a little bit longer, but just please bear with us in that process. And then, yeah, I think, so then the editorial quality. So one thing that I think, even though we accept papers on a rolling basis, not all of them are going to be, so say papers that are submitted throughout this year, right? Some of them will only be considered for the next issue, which is next year's issue, we do have a cutoff date because we want to go to publication. So what we like to do is prioritize quality over quantity, because then that gives us enough time to deal with a set number of papers, be it 8 or 12 papers for one issue. Because sometimes we also have a special edition, that does mean that we really need to focus on quality. The numbers aren't the most important thing, right? Especially if you are trying to strengthen the reputation of your journal. You don't, that I don't think numbers is a very important thing. And so when we do set these deadlines, they're for the internal functioning of the journal, so that when we send it to the university's press for copy editing, we are fortunate enough that they do assist us in that regard. We do all of the heavy lifting. The copy editor is only then involved in the final draft, basically. And that's where they come in and they say, well, this, there's a mistake here, there's a mistake there, can we fix this? And regarding just the last point, regarding the plagiarism, again, because our editors are so involved in the actual manuscripts and the editorial process, they're not just checking structure and style guide issues, I suppose. They also do check the footnoting, are these accurate? And that's done in the stage before it even goes to the peer reviewer, because we don't want to give a peer reviewer something where they'll be like, but why are you giving me a non-original article, or something that's somebody else's work? So we're very stern on that. Before we even send anything out to peer review, that we make sure that everything is, we've dotted all our I's and crossed all our T's, basically. Yeah.
Well, great. Yeah, so much to learn. So first, I have follow-ups, but first I want to really commend the empathy, because you're recognized as a student author. So even though the reviewer says, resubmit or maybe even decline, you still tell them that, okay, this is really good feedback, but we are also willing to, if you address all of it, then we can still reconsider. I think that's an empathy that really is deserved, because sometimes we have editors who are like, oh, they said decline, so we are not moving on with it. And I mean, it's practical, yes, but we really have to understand the positionality of the student author, especially an LLB student author. Yeah, that's the first thing I really want to commend you. And so my follow-ups are one. So as you mentioned, you use in-house first, like in-house peer reviewers or expert reviewers, and you are like privileged. I mean, Pretoria, right? Everyone wants to go there. But my question here is, do you feel like there might be a certain kind of institutional bias where if someone reads, okay, so because we note down all the people who are peer reviewers. So if someone reads it and like, oh wait, it's just people in your institution. So do you think that this can be a challenge where you might actually first want to consider outside people before you consider in-house scholars and practitioners? I don't know what you think about this, but this is something we have done. So our policy is actually, let's look at outside first, and then when worst comes to worst, then we ask one of our faculty members. This is the first thing. And then my second thing I want to ask clarification is, do you have a single peer review editor, or do a range of editors contact the peer review of one of, or the peer reviewers of those articles? So, because this is a problem that the peer reviewers editors of my law review have, because it's always one, right? And talking to all of these many peer reviewers is always a challenge, where you have to remember, sometimes there are 3 or 4 in one paper, right? You have to remind all of them, and it really becomes a huge workload for one person. But some advice we're given is it is important to retain one. So that's my second question. And then the third one is on the decision, right? So, and this is so important. So if the peer reviewer says decline, but then you are the attentive, you're like, okay, I don't think these reasons would merit a decline. So how much leeway do you use here, right? So those are the 3 questions.
Thank you for that. Excuse me. So just to address the first question about using our own, well, the institutional bias. So I think you raise a good point, but part of the thinking, I think, behind this approach was that because we are a student-led journal, practitioners and academics are generally going to be wary. They may be more willing to say no, so it might be hard for us to secure reviewers. And so I think the thinking behind this, at least from our guardians' perspective, was that we shouldn't be able to struggle to find reviewers for the articles. At least the journal keeps going, and this is why we still have the lists, and we still expand our scope. But the first port of call is to say, okay, well, in our faculty, say we receive something on international trade. In our faculty, we have this, say 5 professors or 5 lecturers of international trade, for instance. We should start with them, bearing in mind that they may also not have the capacity. We will still be looking to other institutions, but also considering what the actual topic is. It could be that the author has written something that has to do with international trade, and and as a comparative. You might find that within our faculty, we don't have somebody who has expertise looking just at what they teach, number one, or their own research output. They don't have expertise on that specific topic, and so we might go beyond our borders as well and ask academics from other institutions within Africa, with in different continents as well, if they could please look at this, because we can see that this is what their research is on, right? So I think really the thinking is just so that we have the support we need, right? And also another thing that we do is that if if we ask a reviewer who is internal or even external, if we ask them and they say that they don't have the time, we ask them to please recommend a colleague that they know who will be willing or who is an expert in that field, and then we take it from there. Then your second question. Oh, so then about the number of reviewers, right? So we usually have
it was the number of editors interacting with the reviewers. So do you have one single peer review editor or a couple? Yeah.
So we only have one editor per pair of reviewers. Yeah, I think that way again it streamlines the communication. Yeah. The third question, sorry, now I've lost my track of thought. You asked.
So yeah, I asked about the decision now, like when a peer reviewer says reject, but you think, okay, there might be substantial change, but we can still work with this paper. Or maybe an instance we've seen is someone has rejected a paper because they say it is not supposed to be in a law journal. It's supposed to be a history journal or a philosophy journal. Yeah.
So in instances like that, it rests on the editor-in-chief looking at this. But because again, like I said, we work as a team. So the editor who brings back, this information to us, they have, they have the more, well, they have leeway to give their recommendation. What are their thoughts, right? And we sit and we talk about this, and we just hear different ideas, and also the editor-in-chief again is supported by the senior editors. And so when we have to make a decision such as this one, in particular, we think of ways to not discourage the author, right? Because we always have to think about who is our audience, really, the students, right? So we find ways to say, okay, so if it's being labeled as more historical than legal, we try and find ways to advise the author to say, okay, listen, we're not going to publish in this edition or this issue. What you should rather do is change it in this way. This is what the advice from the reviewer was, that it's reading a bit too historical. Perhaps change your wording, perhaps include more legal resources. And then you can resubmit maybe for the next edition. We'd be happy enough to take it through the peer review process again for you and to look over it for you, etc. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for indulging me for the follow-ups. In fact, so for the last question about if it's in a history journal, in fact, I think we might be in a position where we bridge these multidisciplinary discussions if we publish like historical and if you papers. If our last year's volume had an analysis of imperial presidency, and yes, a reviewer said this is a history paper, but we will know this paper is relevant for this discussion because it was 60 years of the Kenyan Republic, right? So yeah, that's so I realize we really are short on time. So I'll invite Simba and Calvin to answer the same question, and then equally try and be very short. I'll give you 2 minutes each, and then answer this question of high turnover of editorial boards. So this is a question saying, what we are only 3 or 4, we're in the editorial board 3 or 4 years, sometimes even 2 years, and maybe we don't have enough capacity. So you have to train over and over and over again. So how do you deal with that? And then what are your top 3 challenges and what were the top 3 easiest tasks to do? This was a really interesting question also for me. So if you can just minimize your answers into 2 minutes into those. And then the last thing I want to say is for our audience, you please use the Q&A function. I know we really have a lot of questions. So yeah, Calvin, then Kisimba.
All right. So Elvis, just to confirm, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you well.
Okay. My apologies. Earlier, I think I had a network glitch, so it just really messed up, but I managed to switch communication. So my apologies on that. Anyway, so to just respond to your question very fast in regards to the review process, and what happens is that when a paper is received by us, the first duty falls on editor-in-chief to look through it and see that indeed it, at least by face value prima facie, meets the value of it being able to be published in the journal. And from there, what happens is that we have a rota whereby we put on a Google Drive that shows which editor is handling which part and which aspects of handling the paper in terms of critiquing, whether providing a summary of the paper or just plain editing in terms of looking at the footnotes and seeing they have all complied. When that is done, they also input comments, which comments are now, so when they get done with that, they send that paper back to us. We'll look through what they have done, and if we agree with what they have said, we send that paper to the author to carry out the first review, the first changes that should be done on it. When the author is done, he sends it back to us. So at that point, it now becomes the mantle of the editor-in-chief and the deputy to check and see if there are any small things that haven't been complied with, and that at that point now, he has a duty to ensure he works on. If he does that and it's okay, and then at that point, the paper now becomes published, depending on number of issues that have been published in a particular month. So then in regards to the challenges, I think the biggest one, of course, is the funding aspect. So particularly for the Material Journal, what happens is that, so we have a website that we run where the articles are put up, but unfortunately, you find for the time of your tenure, you basically have the duty as editor to run that website. That means includes paying the hosting. The school now will sort of reimburse you for the cost that you have incurred in running that. That's a bit of a challenge. But I'm happy to report that at least right now, some good changes are on board right now with the new team at the school. Seems to be much more willing to be able to fund such different aspects. And it's just really been good. And of course, you suffer a bit so that the next generation can have it a bit more easier and nicer. That's the good thing about it. In regards to what I enjoyed, I just enjoyed the aspect of all the different subject matter that I was able to come across with. Was now I want to say, or I was so I felt so I think hurt that we don't have unfortunate reviewers for the macro journal as of now. So basically, the editor-in-chief or deputy, I basically sit down and like read those papers. So somebody give an example of the law of the sea. So basically, whether I have interfaced with that kind of knowledge or not, I basically have to, it's like a moot. I have to go and sit down and then try to understand all the different aspects. So it's a bit of a challenge, but I found that a good challenge in terms of what I was able to do. But the new team has found a way to diversify that, and they're trying to bring on board different people to kind of do that kind of work. So, but yeah, it was a subject matter. I learned that it was dealing with a lot of teaching, and yeah, so that's really what I can respond to you in 2 minutes or so.
Yeah, thank you for keeping in time, and yes, I think also I share with that joy. In many ways, you walk into rooms and because you're an editor, you understand different conversations because you've read a lot of different papers dealing with different things. So yeah, that is one joy that I will always love. December, please. So again, those two earlier questions, and I think the challenges question can still be the same, right? And then your joys in 2 minutes, and then we'll do a final round of final remarks. Yeah, and if we have a question, we'll answer the question, and if we don't have, we'll just close the panel. So guessing back.
Great. Thank you for the microphone once more. So our review process begins from submission of abstracts. So people submit just a brief explanation of what they want their paper to be about, and that's where we begin the vetting. So I will take the instance of the first issue, where University Law Journal tailors itself as a Pan-African scholarly publication. So we just vet whether it embodies the spirit of Pan-Africanism. The next stage is preliminary review, where we fact check and check the logical flow, whether this paper is something that is actually fit to be vetted, So once we have the feedback on that, we revert the papers to the authors, and then the resubmission follows peer review process. So given that we borrow a leaf from Kabarak Law Review, we have double blind peer review, and it's conducted by two editors. So we have the first, okay, actually, once we have received the papers, they are anonymized by the editor-in-chief, and then they are disseminated amongst the other editors so that we don't have any conflict of bias. Then once the first editor is done with that, it goes to a second editor for the same peer review. So at that stage, we also have our expert editor. For our inaugural issue, we were privileged to have Professor PLO Lumumba as our expert editor, expert review editor for the pieces. And then at that point, we just do the final fact checking, and this is actually in person. What is it? In person or physical? We do not have access to the software, Some of it is out of pocket, and the facilitation may be a bit hard sometimes. But, we are upcoming intellectuals, and we have interacted with AI. So there is this phrase you can just read and you'll know it's AI, You don't really need some of those checking all the time. And, I want to put a spanner in the works with my fellow editors that if I use AI to find out if you're also using AI in writing, then we are in the same boat. I'm not fundamentally any better than you. But that's a brief of our process. Our turnover is actually trainee based, so I'm privileged to actually be accompanied by some of our trainee members this time, and they are the ones who actually get to take up these roles as we proceed. The problems that we encounter include insufficiency of funds. Most of it is just out of pocket from either the editor-in-chief or the other members, and doubts, because this is something that we're beginning. Most people didn't believe in this project. People just say, you're doing this because you just want to do it for sure, but they don't really believe that you want to build something that will outlive the tenure of the team. So yeah, I would say that the easiest things that we have encountered as a team are getting to read different perspectives from across the continent, because our inaugural issue was privileged to have submissions from Kenya, Tanzania, and Nigeria. So you get to have a dynamic view of the systems that are going on. And we also have an easy time debating and vetting the issues. If someone has a commentary regarding the tiff between the Inspector General and the National Police entity, you also get to engage on an intellectual level. And we look forward to growing and borrowing leaves from the very experienced boards that we have here. I don't know if we have room for questions, but I just want to put it to you. I've seen something going around on editorial boards asking for this publication fee. So I just like to see what your opinion is on that. And well, I would like to yield the floor for the microphone. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you for keeping time. And also that's a really good question. I first want to say that yes, like it's something I came across, that you have to pay to be published. I don't know if that it's so much. It's a trope a lot in law journals, at least for the journals I've submitted to, even those from the colonial concrete, like American Journal of International Law. When I was publishing my work, that they didn't ask me to pay fees, right? But yeah, that's something I would love the other ESs could jump in. But so we are really, really short on time. So I will invite us all for one more round, 1 minute each. So giving your concluding remarks, you can touch on any of those questions that you feel like you can want to respond to. And then I am seeing no questions in the Q&A, but for our participants, we definitely are willing to like connect you to any of these panelists if they want to follow on. If you are about to establish a law review, I know like Catholic University of East Africa is so yeah. These people are very accessible. Yeah, so let's start with Wendy for this final closing remarks. Yeah.
Great, thank you. It has been an honor and a pleasure to interact with fellow senior. I think I'm the youngest in this room. I won't say much, but to interact with all of you, it has been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much, Elvis, for the time you have put in. I know we were calling you at 11 p.m. It is not easy, but thank you so much for giving of yourself and for your team as well. With regard to payment to be published, well, that's something that discourages some authors, especially as students. It's quite discouraging. What a solution to that might be publication takes time and financial input, financial resources. I think getting sponsors from I don't know, law firms and just people who would be interested in supporting your particular journal is something great, and people are willing to give. Just if you just take the leap of faith, I've seen that people are so willing to give, and I'd like to interact with the rest of the panelists more, and also other people. You are free to get my contact from Elvis. It's been a pleasure. I've learned a lot, gained so many insights, and I wish you a blessed weekend ahead.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Would love to have known what was your joys, but it's okay. We can speak after. So Ayotunde.
All right, thank you so much, Elvis, and the entire Kabarak University Law Review. Thank you so much for pulling this off. I think we need more of this going forward. This is first of its kind. We need to have more partnerships and knowledge sharing. So to be great for everybody to keep in touch, and let's see how we can widen this network. On the issue of publication fee, we don't do it, and I think we don't find it ethical, because at some point that might be your incentive for a publication, when we understand that we all face funding challenges. But I think we should just think about creative and innovative ways to solve that challenge, and partnership with law firms, leveraging the alumni network. And I think that will solve that. I think what we do as law reviews is very important. We should keep that spirit up. In our respective countries, we should try to help each other, see each other as sister bodies, and try to ensure that law reviews don't die off because of challenges. If there's a way we can help each other, please let's do that. And I would love to keep this conversation going forward and to connect with every one of you. I'm free to, you could reach out to me for anything. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ayotunde. I don't know if Lisa, I know you have to, oh, okay, Sawa, thank you. So Lisa is not able to speak, but she's texted me her final remarks. She wanted to say that it seems we all share the same challenge regarding lack of funding. It may be worthwhile to collaborate in the future to find ways to raise funds for our journals and ways to support our operations. Thank you so much, Lisa, for joining in. We learned a lot from you. Yeah, and again, as Ayotunde said, this is the first of our interactions, and we hope for us, we hope this to be an annual thing. Every year we bring us all together and to just take stock of all that we've done so far. So, Calvin, just 1 minute, please.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to say thank you so much, Elvis, and the entire team at the University university to organize a symposium, and I cannot imagine the kind of stress that you've been under, trust me. So really just want to say thank you so much. Thank you to everyone on the panel, all the previous editors in chief and the current ones. I think we're doing a good thing. It's just that it's one of those things where it's service above self, in the sense that not everyone appreciates the kind of work you do, but then those who know the kind of work you do understand it. And I think we do it for those. So I think we should just keep on that. I hope this continues, and yeah, so everyone just please stay safe, and thank you so much, Elvis, once again.
Yes, thank you so much, Calvin. Gesimba.
Right, thank you. Now, in the spirit of Ubuntu, I am because you are. I just want to give a heavy thanks to Kabarak Law Review and Kabarak University Press for the guidance and mentorship that you have offered and this trailblazing path that you are setting. I do agree that we have not had enough time to exhaust everything. So I also join in adding the voice that this is the first of many. I hope we remain in touch and thank you so much for the engagement. I also just want to put it out there that, in the spirit of epistemic decolonization, we have more university citation guidelines. You did not list us as one of the teams that have a citation guideline. So we have that, and I'd like to welcome everyone to submit to More University Law Journal. We have an active call for papers on climate justice in Africa. Thank you so much for the engagement, and I pray that you guys have good health and prosperity.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Kesimba. Thank you so much for this wonderful panel. I learned a lot. And yes, so even as Kesimba said, I really hope that now we know each other. Now we know the kinds of standards that we have. So we, as Kesimba said, we should be publishing each other. The students in our law schools can be able to send to your law schools, to your law reviews, and we sort of just like the other panels will be talking about accreditation and being cited. If we ensure that there's an ecosystem where we publish each other, we cite each other's work, and ensuring academic rigor and epistemic decolonization, and just like Afrocentrism being the binding line, then we really have a way forward for all of us. So thank you so much once again for also our attendees. We are going to go towards